This is every single fight to make after UFC 289, Nunes versus Aldana. I have all of the key fighters from that card on the screen right now. Some winners, some losers, and you may notice there is an empty box next to all of them, and that's where their next opponent's going to go, who I have hidden around the perimeter of the screen. I'll slowly reveal those opponents one by one as the video goes on and place them where they belong on the screen. Let's start straight away with the people's main event of the card, Oliveira versus Dariush. Of course, we're going to start here because Amanda Nunes retired. She was in the main event, but she's not going to have a matchup coming up next. So I guess we're starting with Charles Oliveira, Beneil Dariush. Charles Oliveira wins by first round TKO. And what's next for Charles Oliveira? I think there's only one answer. What's next for Charles Oliveira? It's Islam Makhachev. It has to happen. There's no other fight to happen right now, and I'm going to explain that to you right now. Charles Oliveira is going to be likely the only man who's going to be able to fight Islam Makhachev in October in Abu Dhabi. You know the UFC are going to have Islam Makhachev in October in Abu Dhabi's main event, and the only guy who can possibly fight him probably is Charles Oliveira. Alexander Volkanovski is fighting next month in a pay-per-view against Yair Rodriguez. He's not going to want to move up without full time to prepare for this massive rematch with everything on the line with Islam Makhachev. And if he is going to make a quick turnaround, I think he's going to want to make a quick turnaround for September in Australia instead of fighting Islam Makhachev in October in Abu Dhabi. So I don't see Volk moving up on 3 months' notice to fight Islam Makhachev in his rematch, because I think he's going to take some damage against Yair even if he does win. He's not going to get a first round KO over Yair. You've also got Poirier versus Gaethje. They're going to go to war. The winner of that would be a great matchup for Islam Makhachev. So maybe the UFC are going to wait and see what happens in Poirier versus Gaethje 2 and then decide what they're going to do with Charles Oliveira. Maybe that's what they do, because if Justin Gaethje wins by first round KO, takes no damage whatsoever, maybe they could do Islam Makhachev, Justin Gaethje, and Oliveira versus the winner of Chandler McGregor, and they delay everything in Oliveira's career. But you've got a situation right now where I don't think Poirier Gaethje 2 is going to be a first round finish. That is going to be a war. They're going to take damage. They're going to be battered after that fight. They're not going to be ready for a 3-month turnaround, less than 3-month turnaround to fight Islam Makhachev. Not going to happen, I don't think. So I think you've got to do Charles Oliveira, Islam Makhachev, because you don't understand how rare of a performance Charles Oliveira just had. Oliveira is the guy known for getting dropped in fights he wins. He always takes damage in fights, goes to war in a fight. This is the first time in a long time he's taken no damage whatsoever. He's the only guy who's coming off a win right now that can even possibly be considered to fight for a belt. And he's in a perfect time to do it because he's got 4 months to have a little bit of a break, get back into a training camp, and end up fighting Islam Makhachev in Abu Dhabi for the rematch. And before you start telling me, oh, but he's not a big enough name, Charles Oliveira, I'm telling you, I might make a whole separate video for this. He's a superstar. Can't deny that now. I believe his post of a collage of pictures after he beat Beneil Dariush got about 800,000 likes in 12 hours on Instagram. 800,000 likes. Not interactions and looks at the post, likes on the post. Then you start looking at the other posts that he made of his finish against Beneil Dariush from cage side, the video of it. 1.3 million likes on that post. I think it was posted 11 hours ago as well. Absolutely crazy. This man is a superstar. And if you can't make this matchup because, you know, you have to, the scheduling makes sense to make this matchup. If you don't want to do it just based on the scheduling, you should arguably give this guy some superstar privilege. And again, I want to mention this before I move on because I've got a lot to say about this matchup. A lot of people see Oliveira, well, they see him as the defending champ in that Islam Makhachev fight. And I was one of those people, like, everyone saw him as the real champ, even though the belt was taken away from him and he didn't become the champion after beating Justin Gaethje, and he was fighting for a vacant belt against Makhachev. He was the defending champ, so he should also get some defending champion privileges. Fair enough, he only defended it a few times, so he didn't get an immediate rematch against Islam Makhachev because Makhachev finished him and didn't take too much damage and it wasn't too competitive of a fight. But he's gone out, he's beaten an up-and-coming contender in Beneil Dariush, and he's the man back on top, and he still beat Poirier and Gaethje. So although I would love to see a fresh matchup for Makhachev in the winner of Poirier-Gaethje, scheduling-wise, it just doesn't seem to make any sense. And scheduling-wise, what makes more sense is Oliveira fights for the belt now, Volk sticks around at featherweight for a bit longer, maybe fights an Aljo that moves up after he beats Sean O'Malley at the end of the year or early next year instead, and that sort of holds Volk up a little bit. Then Volk moves up, and McGregor-Chandler winner takes on the winner of Poirier-Gaethje, especially if it's Conor McGregor, not so much if it's Michael Chandler. Oliveira versus Makhachev in October, make it happen. He's a superstar, and he arguably was a defending champ when he fought Makhachev. He just beat a top contender. He should be back in the mix. We've seen champions with no title defenses get an immediate rematch. Let's make it happen. We move on to another fight. Beneil Dariush. Lost in the main event to Charles Oliveira, took a bit of damage. I don't see him being out for too long, though. I think he's going to be back before about 5 months. So I can see him coming back in November, late October maybe. I don't think this is going to be one of those losses where he goes, oh God, I'm never going to make it. I'm going to sit out for ages and reprocess everything. I think it's going to be a loss where he's going to think about it and go, man, I've made it all this way. I'm not going to sit around. I'm getting old. I need to make the most of this now. And I think they're going to do Beneil Dariush versus Arman Tsarukyan before the end of the year. Maybe they do it in an Apex Fight Night main event with a strong undercard. Maybe they put it on the prelims of a pay-per-view as well. Dariush, Arman Tsarukyan, someone in the top 5 has to draw the short straw to fight Arman Tsarukyan or any of these up-and-comers. And if Arman Tsarukyan beats Joaquim Silva this weekend on the Vettori Cannonier card, then maybe he should be fighting against a top contender in Beneil Dariush. Makes all the sense in the world. And for Beneil Dariush, you should be thinking about this as, you know what? I did all the hard work. I got to the top. If you beat a guy in Arman Tsarukyan, Beneil Dariush is right back in title elimination bout territory. You know what I'm saying? He's looking for that fight that's going to get him to the top 3. You know what I mean? If he beats Arman Tsarukyan, he's right back where he left off. And I think he's going to understand that and look to get right back in there and fight him while he's as young as possible. The longer he gives Arman Tsarukyan to prepare, the worse it's going to get. So why not take on the youngest version of Arman Tsarukyan? So I think this is the fight that takes place. Perfect matchup. Going to be a good test for Arman Tsarukyan as well. Just give Beneil Dariush a little bit of time off. Hopefully Arman does beat Joaquim Silva. He should 100% beat him, but we all know that anything can happen in MMA. But Arman Tsarukyan, if he beats Joaquim Silva well, bring him back. MSG prelims in November, pay-per-view card. Beneil Dariush, Arman Tsarukyan, or an Apex Fight Night main event around that time as well. Irene Aldana lost to Amanda Nunes in the main event of UFC 289 because she did absolutely nothing in that fight. So no surprise that she lost. She did nothing. She beat Ketlin Vieira a long time ago. Now, Ketlin Vieira is fighting against Pani Kianzad soon, I believe, in like a top 10 matchup in the women's bantamweight division. And Irene Aldana has slept Ketlin Vieira before, but Ketlin Vieira is still ranked above her in the rankings. So if Ketlin Vieira beats Pani Kianzad, maybe they should do the rematch between Irene Aldana and Ketlin Vieira. I think in terms of what's going to happen for the vacant belt at bantamweight now, I reckon they're probably going to do something like a Raquel Pennington versus the winner of Holm versus Bueno Silva, or they're going to do the winner of Holm versus Bueno Silva versus Juliana Pena. One of those types of matchup, I think, is what's going to happen in the bantamweight division. Nothing good in terms of pay-per-view sellers, but this is the matchup that I think should happen. Irene Aldana, Ketlin Vieira too. KO'd her in the first fight. Let's see who's gotten better since that first fight. We move on to another fighter on the card, Mike Malott, on the feature fight of the pay-per-view card. We need to take advantage of him being in that feature fight position. He's got a sudden boom of popularity now. Finally, people know who he is. He's on everyone's radar right now if you're a UFC fan. And I feel like, although people are saying, I saw people leaving comments on Mike Malott's posts, and the posts the UFC were even making about Mike Malott, saying things like, time for a top 15 opponent. It's time for Mike Malott to get that top 10 guy. And I'm like, he beat Adam Fugitt. Before that, he beat Johan Lunes. And before that, he beat Mickey Gall. Those are the bottom feeders of the welterweight division. I still think he needs a good unranked win, like Ian Gary's win against Daniel Rodriguez. So someone who's quite similar in level to Daniel Rodriguez is Li Jingliang. I think this is a great matchup. Mike Malott versus Li Jingliang. Amazing matchup in the welterweight division. And for Li Jingliang right now, he injured his spine a couple of months ago. He was supposed to be fighting Michael Chiesa at UFC 287. Injured his spine. It has to be out for a little while, but I think he's going to be looking to come back at the end of the year. And I feel like in terms of Mike Malott, you've got to make the most out of that Canadian market. And you've got to look at places in the US that are convenient for Canadians to get to, right? So I think MSG in New York is probably quite good for people from Toronto. I don't know much about US geography. I know it's a massive place, but I feel like Toronto to New York is a bit of a more convenient travel than a Toronto to a Las Vegas. You know what I mean? So, or a Florida somewhere. So I think we keep Mike Malott in the north of the US, if you will, and you put him on that New York card, MSG, on the prelims against Li Jingliang. And for Li Jingliang, again, he's 35 years of age. I think the UFC need to start looking at him as a guy who has got a bit of popularity recently. Let's either see if that's sink or swims. He's 35 years of age. They're paying him a ton of money. They're not going to go, oh, here's a gimme fight against Tim Means, and then we'll move you up the rankings afterwards. He's long past that point in his career. It's sink or swim for Li Jingliang. Do Mike Malott, Li Jingliang in November, MSG prelims, or a bit earlier. I don't mind if it's a little bit earlier. It could be a little bit earlier, who knows. But Mike Malott versus Li Jingliang, great matchup. I think it'll be great. Yeah, just like if Li Jingliang wins, he's right back in the mix, looking for a ranked opponent. If Mike Malott wins, he's right looking for a ranked opponent as well. So just something we have to do in that division. And I think it'll be a great matchup. Also, I don't want to do like Mike Malott. There's a few up-and-comers right now in a division like JDM, Ian Gary, Joaquin Buckley, Jeremiah Wells is 3-0 right now. Mike Malott is there now as well, 3-0 in a division. You've got Michael Morales coming up as well, I think as well. Another guy coming up in that division that also beat Adam Fugitt, by the way. And I think keep them away from each other for now. Let's start doing what they're doing at middleweight, where they're giving these up-and-comers the top contenders to try and switch up the bit of the, shift up the rankings and the way the rankings look. Let's get all of them to the top and then have them fight each other. Mike Malott, Li Jingliang. We move on to another fighter. Dan Ige beat Nate Landwehr in a very impressive performance for Dan Ige. 2 knockdowns in round 1 and 2, won him the fight very clearly. He did take a little bit of damage, but didn't get concussed or knocked down or KO'd or anything like that. And he did say that he wanted to be active, and he mentioned a name in Sadiq Youssef. And I think Sadiq Youssef is a great matchup for Dan Ige. Both guys right next to each other in the rankings. I believe like number 11 and 10 or 11 and 12, who knows. I think Sadiq Youssef is one spot above Dan Ige, but I think Dan Ige should move above him now that he just beat Nate Landwehr. And I think it makes sense. Both around each other in the rankings, both coming off wins right now. Sadiq Youssef's on a 2-fight win streak, just beat Don Shanis on short notice, and then before that beat Alex Caceres. So they're both good, just outside the top 10 featherweights. Keep them active. Dan Ige should not have been on the main card of a pay-per-view. Neither should Mike Malott. So keep them active, give them a great matchup, and put them on another good card moving forward. And I think Dan Ige versus Sadiq Youssef sounds to me either like a great prelim headliner of a not-so-great pay-per-view, or a good Apex co-main event. I think if they did an Apex card with Beneil Dariush, Arman Sarukian in the main event, and Dan Ige versus Sadiq Youssef in the co-main event, and then maybe another decent matchup on the main card elsewhere in the feature fight, that would be a decent Apex card compared to some of the ones they've been putting on recently. So Dan Ige, Sadiq Youssef, late September, early October, fight night card, co-main event. We move on to another fighter, Nate Landwehr, Nate the Train. It hurts me that he lost. I wanted him to win, but I did predict him to lose because I saw it coming. He leaves his chin a bit too high. But he shouldn't be looking to take too much time off. He's 35 years of age. It's now or never in his career. So I think he needs to get right back in there and get a win and get all of that momentum back. And I think a great person for him to scrap against would be Daniel Pineda, just because they're on similar schedules. They both fought recently. Daniel Pineda recently fought Alex Caceres. They both lost decisions, and they both took a bit of damage in those decisions as well. As much as I would love to see Nate Landwehr fight in Nashville, Tennessee, I feel like that's probably not going to happen now. I reckon we're probably going to see Nate Landwehr looking to come back in November, MSG prelims. I'm looking at MSG prelims for a lot of these fighters, schedule-wise. Just seems to make sense. Maybe they could even do it on the McGregor card in December and put him on the prelim headliner there, because I know he's the sort of guy, Nate Landwehr, where maybe he won't be a top contender, a top 10 guy, but you've always got to kind of have him on those special cards, lower down on the card, because he's going to warm up the crowd. You know what I mean? He's like a crowd warmer that you'd put on. He's an opening act. So let's do Nate Landwehr, Daniel Pineda. Both don't know how to have non-exciting fights. They always bring it. They're always exciting. Great matchup, similar schedules, both coming off losses. Landwehr, Pineda, whoever wins gets their chance against a near top 15 guy again. We move on to another fighter, Marc-Andre Barriault. Got a big win against Eric Anders. Took some damage in the fight, though. Not too much, but needs a little bit of time off. I think he should fight against Christian Leroy Duncan. Scheduling-wise, it makes sense. Ranking-wise, it makes sense. The winner of this one can start looking to guys like Brad Tavares or the Nassourdine Imavovs, the Chris Curtises, those guys that float in and out of the rankings in the middleweight division. And yeah, the winner of this one would make sense because Christian Leroy Duncan, I'm burping. Christian Leroy Duncan is fighting Armen Petrosyan on next weekend's card. Vettori versus Cannonier this weekend's card. So I think they should do Marc-Andre Barriault versus Christian Leroy Duncan. Battle of the triple barrel surnames, or the double barrel surnames, if you will. And we'll do Marc-Andre versus Christian Leroy. Makes sense. Make it happen. Similar schedules. Leroy's going to want a little bit of time off after his next fight as well. He might not beat Armen Petrosyan. Maybe they do Armen Petrosyan versus Marc-Andre. Who knows? Just makes sense to tie those names together based on where they're fighting. Literally in a couple of days, Leroy Duncan's fighting and Andre just fought. They're going to be on similar schedules to come back around the same time. We move on to another fight on the card. Nassourdine Imavov versus Chris Curtis. Nassourdine Imavov was looking good. Chris Curtis wasn't looking the best, but we wanted to see what would happen in the late second round and the third, and we never got there because of the head clashes from Nassourdine Imavov. One of them, anyway, the head clash from Nassourdine Imavov that cut open Chris Curtis. You know what I'm going to do. I'm making the rematch. Nassourdine Imavov versus Chris Curtis makes all the sense in the world, in my opinion, to run this one back. And Chris Curtis has been he had a bit of a streak recently, and what happens with fighters is they start winning, and they start getting bonuses, and they start getting these places to live, and all these living expenses, and they start living within their means as a winner. And then they start getting losers' paychecks, and they're like, damn, I got to stay active because I'm losing now. I just bought this house, and now my paychecks are halved because I'm losing. So he's going to need to get back in there. It's only a cut above the eye. It was just in a bad position. So I see him healing that up and looking to turn this around in about 3 months' time. He's not getting any younger. Get right back in there, Chris Curtis, and try and right that wrong. It was looking bad for you, but who knows? Nassourdine Imavov, Chris Curtis, on the Paris September Fight Night card. Makes all the sense in the world. Nassourdine Imavov from France. Chris Curtis has been over to London before, so I'm sure he's not going to be against going to Paris to fight over there. Nassourdine Imavov versus Chris Curtis. It makes sense in Paris in a few months' time. Run it back, get it over and done with, and the winner can move on to the top 10. We move on. Steve Erceg got a big win against David Dvorak in his debut. Beat the number 10 guy in the world in his debut. Very impressive performance from him. I think they should do Steve Erceg, not versus another ranked opponent or a top 10 guy next. He's on a very low-level contract. He's probably going to be earning 14 for 14. You don't want him fighting top 10 guys for that amount of money. So I think they should do Steve Erceg versus David Dvorak. Makes sense. It makes all the sense in the world. Steve Erceg, David Dvorak, make it happen. I love the matchup, and I think it'll be a great, great fight in the flyweight division. Alan Nascimento Ferreira has deserved a jump up the rankings. I think I just called him Dvorak, but he's Alan Nascimento Ferreira that I just pulled out here. And I think it'd be a great matchup. Nascimento was supposed to fight a month or two ago, got injured, probably looking to come back around the end of the year or in a couple of months' time. So let's do him versus Steve Erceg in September on the Australia pay-per-view card. Erceg's an Aussie. He wants to fight on the Australia pay-per-view, and now he's going to be ranked. So there's a reason for Alan Nascimento to take him on and be willing to take that fight. So make this matchup, and then we'll start talking about top-ranked fighters again for Steve Erceg. Let's not rush. We don't want him having like 12 for 12 paychecks against Manel Cap and Alejandro Pantoja. You know what I mean? Make this matchup. We move on to nothing. It's over. Like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. See you later. Toodle pip. Oliveira Makhachev makes sense, dude. Oliveira is legit a superstar. So if they don't want to do it based on credit, at least do it based on superstar power. Give him some of that Dana White privilege. See you later. Goodbye. Toodle pip.